Hello. I'd like to talk about the second half of what I call technical service and acquisitions. Now, the first section I covered was acquisitions, which is part of technical services, but now I'm going to talk about the rest of technical services, the sections of the library that serve to get materials onto the shelf from what the selector decides to order. Acquisitions, as we mentioned, covers the aspects of actually placing the orders. Now we're going to take it from the aspect after the order has been placed. Well, within technical services, there are probably three additional parts to technical services, which work with the selector and acquisitions. Now, the first one, of course, is receiving. The mail section of the library usually that's going to receive boxes of books from the various vendors and locations where acquisitions order the book. Once the boxes are opened, often they go initially through acquisitions to be effectively checked into the system. And then the next steps are cataloging and processing. So after the books are received by the library, handled by acquisitions to acknowledge the receipt into the system, they go on to the process of cataloging and processing. Some of these things are handled by pre-cat, but we're going to operate from the perspective, in many cases, of a book or item has been received by the library and now needs, in a book process, it would have to go to cataloging. If it was a serial publication, it would probably bypass cataloging because acquisitions would handle the labeling and various other aspects possibly than the rest of them, or it might just go straight to processing and avoid cataloging. So cataloging, strictly speaking, are books. Now, as I told you, receiving goes from the mailroom to acquisitions. But from acquisitions, it's going to go to cataloging. Now, there are generally two aspects to cataloging. Most libraries don't bother with original cataloging. Most libraries only do copy cataloging. Copy cataloging exists when the book, we'll stick with the idea of a book, not electronic or anything of that nature, but we're talking about specific books. And when I say books in this case, I do mean books. Copy cataloging, in general, outside of pre-catalog or anything, copy cataloging is going to take a book there's cataloging that exists in the world, and they're going to just simply copy it onto their record. Originally, copy cataloging had to deal with creating cards and different things which were ordered. Today, it would be copy cataloging would be putting the information into the ILS and copying it from existing information. In many cases, some libraries will modify the record in the integrated library system for some particulars about the library. Original cataloging, specifically, are dealing with books that there is no cataloging whatsoever for the book. There are very brand new books that are originally cataloged, usually by locations like Library of Congress. But then there are books that are received by overseas, which may not have U.S. cataloging. For example, Africana books, let's say, which have never been cataloged into the U.S. Various countries may not have good cataloging in the U.S. Maybe a very specific edition or something. But original cataloging, which did exist in many academia libraries, took books which have never been cataloged whatsoever, and they create cataloging for the book. So original cataloging would be something that has never got any cataloging at all, and the library is going to create cataloging. Now, traditionally, in the old years ago, what would happen is there are institutions which are considered authoritative. Of course, the Library of Congress is authoritative, but then there were other universities like, say, University of Michigan, or different schools in each one, University of Illinois, University of Iowa, probably one of the University of California sites would have authoritative record, which means that if they cataloged it, it is as authoritative as if the Library of Congress would do the cataloging. So a small library might have an original cataloging department, originally catalogs it, but as soon as one of the authoritative sites catalog it, it's going to overwrite the cataloging that is done at some particular location. That all depends on if it's cataloged by any other site. That's considered authoritative. Now, traditionally, in the library, there were four specific cards. There was what's referred to as the shelf card. These are cards that are kept in cataloging, or an area there in there where the cards were filed by call number. So effectively, the shelf cards were the same as the materials on the shelf. If it was a Dewey collection, and they might have a fiction section, in which case the cards would say fiction and be arranged by that. If it was a university and it used the Library of Congress, they would be arranged specifically by call numbers. Then there was an author set of catalogs, which were considered main entry. There was title, and there were subject catalogs. Now, pretty much all these cards sets that existed are covered in the integrated library systems of today. Some libraries still keep a shelf list section, but in any case, author cards, title cards, subject cards are all part of the ILS. The ILS also includes other things. Nowadays, it includes chapters of the book and cover images in addition to what used to be in the card sets. So when you look at an integrated library system, any system, you can search it pretty much by words. And what it's doing when you're searching by words, like most times it's a keyword search, you're effectively searching all these things at one time. You're searching the authors, you're searching the titles, you're searching the subject headings, which actually still exist in these catalogs. If you look at the metadata, the records in the system, but it also includes chapters. So those chapters are also searchable. So effectively with an ILS, in the old days, you'd had to look up either an author, a title, or a subject, and there's probably about 3 subject headings for any one book. Nowadays, you can search pretty much anything that's in the record at all. Author, title, subject, chapters, etc. And that's why an ILS is a lot better in locating information than any of the cards wherever. Now, when it comes to author catalogs, there's going to be a specific way the names are handled. How do you handle VAN or names that start with VAN? How do you handle names that start with an MC or MAC? All types of rules. And originally, these rules were covered by what's called the AARC2, or the Anglo-American Cataloging Rules, 2nd edition. It's been around in the 2nd edition for years, and it's been published since 1967, but it ceased publication in 2005. And because of that, it has gone to RIDAs, or Research Description and Access, which is current. Implemented officially in 2010, it's been around since 2010, but it was actually implemented into the systems in 2013. So while the Anglo-American Cataloging Rules existed for effectively many years of my life, And I've got actually 2 copies, personal copies of the AARC2 rules, the 2nd edition. But as I said, it existed until 2005 and has been replaced by the RDA, or Resource Description and Access, which is the current methodology of correcting names, and it's part of the RDA toolkit. Both of those publications, the AARC2 and the RDA, are part of the American Library Association and organizations. Now, there's a gentleman by the name of Michael Gorman who disapproved of the RDA. Of course, he was editor for years on the AARC2, but he disapproves with the idea of the RDA. Now, Michael Gorman was the president of the American Library Association, and for years he was the University Librarian of Illinois. He's a British who came to the U.S. and worked at University of Illinois for years, ending up as the University Librarian for them. He's a proponent of Ranganathan's 5 laws, in the book, or actually, excuse me, online, you can easily find, if you search for Michael Gorman, you can find his 5 new laws and 8 values of librarianship. His 5 new laws are taking Ranganathan's 5 laws and taking it into today's world. And the 8 values or concepts of what a good librarian would have are listed as well. I don't list them here because if you do Michael Gorman and you look for the laws and various things, you'll find them very easily, even in Wikipedia. I think in Michael Gorman's case, they'll have those listed. If you do him as a Wikipedia reference, you'll find his 5 new laws and his 8 values, and they're very good. They're very interesting. Too lengthy to put into the slide, but very interesting to talk about. So please take a look at it. We can discuss those because they are very good values. Now, in cataloging, depending on the library in academia libraries, they use Library of Congress classification. I've got a link here. It's easy to find. If you go to the Library of Congress site and do LC classification, you would be able to find the classification system used by Library of Congress. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. Others of you are familiar with Dewey. And if you go to the OCLC site and do Dewey, it'll give you a breakdown of all the Deweys. Many of you may be familiar with Dewey where you work, knowing what 100s and 800s and such and all the subcategories are. And Library of Congress, same thing. It's a list. Both of them, both Library of Congress classification and Dewey, use Library of Congress subject headings. Now, Library of Congress subject headings were known as the red books because they were always published with a red cover, usually 2+ books, and they're very thick. You may be familiar with them, but you certainly can look them up easily. I've got a link here, Library of Congress site, where it's James Billington, who used to be the director of the Library of Congress, cutting a cake as sort of an anniversary of the Red Book. It talks about the Red Book as well. The interesting thing about the Red Book is, because it's always published in red, you can say that, but it's actually referred to as Library of Congress subject headings, and the Red Book is just always the cover it's been in. Now, after cataloging is through, it goes to labeling. Labeling actually puts property stamps and labels on a physical material. If there was not a call number pre-cataloged onto the system, they're going to create a catalog number for the item. They're going to print it. Many good printers and software are available to actually create labels if need be. Property stamps are a lot of times what they'll do is they'll put a property stamp on the front cover, on the inside of the front cover, and then they will pick a specific page that they always put a property stamp on one of the pages within the document. For example, they might turn to page 30 and always put a stamp on page 30. That happens to be specific for the library, how they decide to do that. But the idea is always to put a property stamp on the front cover, maybe on the back cover, but also often put a property stamp on a corner of a page on a specific page in the book. Now, radio frequency identification, which are used by a lot of libraries, is often added during cataloging. It could be added during labeling, but often is added at some point during the process. And what that does, if you are familiar with RFID in your library, what it allows you to do is check out a book without actually scanning the book. Some libraries do self-checkout, and a person, will scan their card, but you can put like maybe 7 books on the plate, and it'll read the RFIDs and check out all 7 books at one time, something of that nature. So RFID allows the library to check out material without actually opening the book. But it has another feature. RFID later on, when you're doing shelving or shelf reading, you can have a scanner that goes across the shelf. Using RFID just really quickly to see if books are out of order. Also, as I told you, they mark the material as being owned by the library with property stamps, and they do various other labels. And then if the library chooses to keep dust covers, academic libraries often take dust covers off books, but public libraries often keep dust jackets on books. Often covering those with another plastic cover to keep it safe from use on the shelf. Now, in terms of shelving, which is the final step, there's got to be somebody that puts materials on the shelf, plus re-shelving materials that's been checked out, finding books on tables and shelving them. In academic libraries, these employees are referred to as shelvers. In public libraries, they're referred to as pages. In public libraries, often pages are high school students. In academic libraries, shelvers are often undergraduates getting an extra job working in shelving. There's almost always a head of shelving in academic libraries, an employee that oversees and hires the shelvers. In public library, pages are usually part of circulation. Now, another step to consider is binder aid and repair. Depending on your library, how much you repair books. If it's a public library, they may actually, if it's really truly damaged, they may weed it as opposed to doing anything else. If it's a academic library, they tend to repair the books. There are multiple things that can happen. Damaged books can go to repair units, which will actually physically fix the book. Loose pages are tipped in. The term of putting a loose page back into the book, gluing a loose page back into the book is referred to as tipping in. That's a process where they use a particular kind of it's a particular glue that you purchase that you touch on the edge of the page and slide it in the book, and it locks into place. Various other repairs. Maybe for a torn page, they might use a particular kind of tape that is safe to use. If the book is seriously damaged, there are actually preservation librarians who can physically repair books, sew the pages together and do different things to repair the book as if it looked like it had never been damaged. Many academic libraries often have a unit or a person who is a professional preservationist to repair materials. Other types of materials, damages that might occur, smoke damages or water damage. If it's a smoke damage, you can put material in something like charcoal, a container that has charcoal or different other products that absorb the smoke out of the book. If it's water damage, it depends on how old the damage is and different things. We're going to talk about preservation in another section more precisely, but these things can be repaired. Even water damage can be repaired, depending on if the book is, a variety of things. But there is usually a bindery or a repair unit to fix materials. Back in the day, now, mind you, most libraries use electronic things like Elsevier and different places for electronic journals in academia. So not many people have to do bindery of journals, but in the past you used to bind journals. So the level of which any unit has varies quite a bit now with a lot of electronic material. Now, there's a workflow that occurs on a regular cycle. In other words, a selector should order things on a regular basis. You should not, as a selector, should not order material like in batches, like once every 3 months. You should order materials on a monthly basis. Take your budget for whatever the budget is and divide it up into about 12 units so that you push materials through on a regular monthly cycle. That helps with the workflow in technical services, that they're dealing with things constantly as opposed to getting them in batches. So the workflow is assisted by the selectors who order on a regular basis. Again, if you have any questions about this topic or any other, you can send a message on the virtual office. You can send messages via email, or you can send questions on any of the discussion pages. We'll talk about this topic a little bit further on the discussion pages, but suffice it, the two sections on these two chapters cover acquisitions and technical services in general. You get a little bit better information perhaps from the book on some aspects of metadata, but I think covered this fairly well. Thank you. Hope this works well. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Thank you.